You're listening to a Rev FM production podcast. Welcome to Pastors Live, the show that discusses things of the Bible and current events for people who love to laugh. And now, the hosts who answer questions with more questions. It's Pastors Dave, Ty, Shane, and the other guy.
Good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday. It's November 20th of 2024, and we are having a wonderful time here today. And by the way, you know what? I'm kind of enjoying the colder weather. Are you guys enjoying the colder weather?
A little bit.
Here's the thing about living in Idaho. We have seasons, and I like the fact that we have seasons. We can have a 120 degree variance throughout the year. Like we can be 20 below zero, and we can be 100 degrees or a little above. And so I kind of like the fact that we have seasons, and I love it because it's this constant renewal. And it really shows us the grace of God, right? The sun comes up every day, goes down every day. There's nowhere that's hidden from that light. There's a season of renewal, and I love that picture in the weather. So if you're feeling bad about the fact it's getting colder, just remember spring is coming, and it really speaks of renewal and resurrection and future hope and the redemption of all things. And so I just want to point that out for whatever that's.
But the winter season is also a good time for pruning, right? When all of the life-giving juices have gone back down into the main trunk, or as it may be, and you've got those branches that need to be trimmed. This is the time to do it. You're not damaging them, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes, people will come forward after a service for prayer, and they'll. Oh, man, really pray for me. I just really feel like I don't know, I'm in this season of unfruitfulness. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You may be in a winter season.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because that means spring is coming.
Right.
And what you do now will have consequences for how that fruit is manifest and so forth. So.
It's super, super important. And I want to encourage people, man, just be in the Word. And of course, when you're in those dry seasons, go to the water of the Word,
That's right.
Go to the water of the Word.
That's right.
Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The first few chapters of First Chronicles can be a little
exciting.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
9 chapters of names of people getting down, people begetting and begetting. And then there's one guy named Jabez in the middle of all of it who wants some more land. So,
hey, that was a big windfall for Dr. Bruce.
It was actually the prayer of Jabez. It was like, just kind of pointing that out. Hey, so a couple things I do want to encourage everybody. Hey, say hello to a teacher today and encourage them and say thank you. And the reason for that is today is Future Teachers of America Today. And we need more teachers, and we need people who are willing to be teachers and are willing to educate. And so, would you guys just be just appreciate the people who are in education?
Yeah, and I would only add to that, and I agree 100%. I would also say we need more Christian teachers in public education.
Yeah.
Good friend of mine stopped by my office last week and visited for a little bit. And he's a public education teacher here in Idaho Falls. And we were swapping war stories from my decade of working in public education in Oregon. And it just reminded me, thank God for this brother, because we need, and your wife, of course, we need Christians in public education, as well as we're big on Christian education around here, obviously. We have Water Spring School. God's blessing it. We're so grateful and humbled. But, hey, if God calls you into that mission field, God bless you, man.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, go and be the light. I think one of the things that I loved about our reading today, as we were getting into it, I was looking at the idea of favoritism, right, and being equitable and treating people fairly and things like that. And in James chapter 2, starting in verse 20, it says, "My brethren." So James is, he's obviously writing to the church. He says, "Brethren, do not hold the faith of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, with partiality. And that leads us back to, and I love this because we really do need to know our Old Testament. This leads us back to the Torah, it leads us back to the law, and it leads us back to Leviticus. And he says in verse 15 of Leviticus chapter 19, you shall do no injustice in judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. In righteousness, you shall judge your neighbor. This whole idea that we want to be impartial. And I'll tell you guys a funny story about that. So years ago, I got called for jury duty. You guys, who's gotten called for jury duty lately? Anybody? Oh, yeah. Speaking of getting called for jury duty, we've got some guys here in the studio. We've got Gary Austin's here today.
Hey, guys.
Pastor Steve's here today.
Hello.
Pastor Dave's here today.
God bless you guys.
Shane is still out, not feeling 100%. And then, of course, I'm Ty, but he's getting mo better.
I think Shane will be here tonight.
Yeah, I think so too. But I do want to kind of point out, I got called to jury duty, and I showed up and I recognized people, and I went, so what happened is I got called for jury duty, and I knew the plaintiffs. In fact, I knew the plaintiffs really well. He was a professor that I had when I was in college, and before they did the voir dire, the judge asked, "Is there anybody here that feels like they should be dismissed?" And I said, and I raised my hand, and he said, "Well, stand up." And and the judge knew me because I was a chaplain for law enforcement. And I said, "Your Honor, I think I should be dismissed." He says, "Why?" I said, "Because I have a personal relationship with the plaintiffs." And he looked at me and he goes, "Are you telling me that you can't be impartial, even though you can't be impartial with facts? Are you telling me you can't be impartial?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not telling you." Then he said, "Then sit down and shut up."
Wow!
And so I said, "Yes, sir, Your Honor." Of course, the defense attorney got rid of me like right after that, but
for cause,
for cause, yeah. He's like, "And Mr. Orr for cause," and I'm like, "That's fine." But the judge wasn't going to let me do that, and I've actually for years I've often thought about that when I read this passage, because the reality is, if we'll slow down a little bit, we can be impartial. We can look at the facts, and we can treat people kindly, and we can treat people the same. Whether they're rich or whether they're poor, we can treat people with love, honor, and grace, which is what we're called to do.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the guy's name now, and I'm drawing a complete blank. Oh, man. Martin Mull, the actor. I was a young assisting pastor in Los Angeles County and got called up for jury duty. And so, they're questioning the potential jurors, and I get up there, and the guy says to me, "So do you believe that everybody should be treated equally?" I said, "Well, sure." And he says, "And do you believe that everybody, no matter who they are or what their status is, that they should have to answer, to the law?" And, Martin Mull is sitting there, so who the defendant is in this case, And I'm like, "Well, yeah, sure." And he says, "And do you believe that everybody will answer to the law?" And I said, "Do I believe everybody will answer to the law? I mean, obviously there are people who get away with crimes, but yeah, at some point everybody will answer to the law."
Of course, that's Torah.
And so the judge looks at me, very, very lovely judge, looks at me, and she says, "Well, Mr. Coleman, what do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, so you're the judge in this courtroom, but ultimately we're all going to answer to the judge, right?" And she smiles and says, "Mr. Coleman, I assume you're referring to God?" And I said, "Well, yes, Your Honor." And she says, "Mr. Coleman, what do you do for a living?" And I said, I'm a pastor." And she literally bellowed. I mean, she laughed. And she said, "Mr. Coleman," she says, you understand that there is not a defense attorney in all of Los Angeles County that's going to seat you on a jury, right? And I said, what do you mean, Your Honor? I'm a kid, I'm young, I was in my late 20s or something, What do you mean, Your Honor? And she says, Mr. Coleman, you can't be that naive. You're a pastor? I said, yes, ma'am. And she says, there's not a defense attorney in all of Los Angeles County that's going to seat you. Would you like me to just dismiss you now? And I said, Your Honor, I seriously came here to just do my duty. It's an honor to do your duty as a citizen. And she just laughed. She says, Mr. Coleman, I love you. I'm going to go ahead and excuse you now, and you can just go on back to work. In the future, when you get a jury summons, just mark on there, I'm a pastor, send it back in, and you won't hear from us again. I said, well, Your Honor, that's rather sad, don't you think? She says, well, Mr. Coleman, I think it is. My experience tells me you'll never be seated on a jury. Thank you for your service. I thought it was sad. I could have helped Martin Mull.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, though, I mean, some people are threatened by justice.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, well, no, this is a person who's actually going to weigh the facts, and also, well, we're going to pray too. I mean, that's part of that. But let us know. By the way, how many of you have had? If you have a funny jury story that you can actually tell, right? Because sometimes But if you have a funny,
right, of course, there's some stuff you're supposed to talk about.
We'd love to hear it. Pastors Live at the Rev.fm. If you're currently on a jury, we don't want to hear from you. That's a no-no. But Pastors Live at the Rev.fm. If you have a funny jury story, we would love to hear from you. I think those are great.
Your story,
not
your
someone
funny
else.
story.
Yeah, your funny story,
not a movie.
Yeah, no.
Right,
a movie.
Yeah, no, I don't want to hear any quotes.
You saw.
I don't want to hear anything from Suits.
Right.
I don't.
None of that stuff.
None of that stuff.
We have an interesting question. You guys want to?
Yeah, let's do it.
Grab it. This is from our good friend Sandy, and Sandy writes in and
Great.
says,
Now I have music from Grease in my head.
I know.
Oh, okay.
Pastors Live. You guys were talking about the resurrection on a recent episode last week, and it sparked a thought. Which is hopefully we like doing that. We like sparking thoughts, right? We don't want to just be drab. So she says, when I was much younger, a pastor told me that it was a sin to be cremated. Sandy, I grew up in a church. I don't know if they called it a sin, but it was definitely verboten. You were not to be cremated. She says, I know that's not true. That's not a sin, but I am curious what you guys think on Pastors Live. Is being cremated a choice that we're able to make even though we're dead? In other words, even though we're dead, right?
Can we make the choice after we're dead? That's how it kind of reads, but yeah. Okay.
I think what she's saying, right, is so we're dead. Does it matter if we get cremated? Right. What about being burned alive? Obviously, some people get burned alive. That's a terrible thing.
Yeah,
so
it's awful.
If you're going to say, you can't be cremated because at the rapture or the resurrection, this, that, and the other, well, then her answer is
think about all the men in the Arizona.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's like,
a lot of them Christians.
All those guys are, lost for eternity. No, of course not. And she recognizes that. Also, what about people who are lost at sea and are never found? I mean, I don't know that it won't make a difference to God because He knows what to do. Hey, thank you guys for all the joy that Pastors Live brings. Great questions. It sounds like you already kind of know the answer. When I was a kid growing up in the fundamentalist church, right, cremation was forbidden, and it was always the scripture that was used. And I don't have it off the top of my head. Maybe one of you guys could quick look it up on Blue Letter Bible or Logos or something. But the question or the scripture that's always used is where God tells the children of Israel, "You are not to put your children through the fire." And so they would say, so see, you're not supposed to be cremated. Well, the problem is God is telling the children of Israel, I don't want you to be like Egypt, the people I just brought you out from, nor do I want you to be like the Canaanites, the people of the land to where I'm bringing you. Egypt is a picture of the world, and God says, I don't want you to be worldly. You're my people. Also, I don't want you to get into weird religious practices.
Leviticus.
Which one is it?
Leviticus 18:21.
There it is. Leviticus 18:21?
And it's Leviticus 18:21, and it actually says, "Do not give your children to be sacrificed to Molech."
That's right.
If you depending on the
offering.
translation,
it's an offering.
It's you don't kill your children as an offering to a false god. That's
there you go.
what it's saying.
And so the system I grew up in, they latched onto that and said, "See, God is against cremation." No, listen, God is against His people being worldly. And he is against his people having weird religious practices like offering your children in sacrifice to a God. If anything, by the way, just as a side note to that, the killing of the unborn, where they are actually burned through the saline solution. That, to me, would be more akin to what God is talking about in Leviticus. Don't burn your children to please the gods, the false gods, and America has done that many millions of times over, and it's a shame to us. Having said that, that has nothing to do with cremation, and quite frankly, there have been many families who have had to say, "Look, the embalming, the casket, the land, the plot, that we don't have that." We just don't have the money, the finances.
Right.
And cremation has been something that a family could do and still have the closure and have the remains of their loved one that they could deal with in a wise fashion.
Well, I think one of the things to remember, too, is, when you look at Genesis 3:19, right, and you're dealing with those three beautiful poems, right, regarding what's now happened and God bringing the curse, right? And he says, you will sweat and work hard for your food. In other words, by the sweat of your brow, you will eat, right? Right. And later you will return to the ground because that's where you were taken. You are dust, and when you die, you shall return to the dust. And to dust you shall return, literally, right? You have to understand, we are bound to return to the dirt from which we came. And if you think about it, a man came from the dirt, and then a woman came from man. So she is also will return to that original state. So when we die and we're buried, we return to that original state. One of the things that we have in our culture now is we have this kind of this whole business now of embalming and keeping the body from decaying and all those other things. And in some ways, I don't want to I don't want to have all the lifeblood, because the life is in the blood. I don't want to have all my blood replaced with a chemical, right? And it's like, you know what? I'm good with just let me get back to my original state faster, because God can still resurrect, and that's not. And so the answer to the question is like those that died at sea, those who've died in fire, those who've tragic or things like that. Mm-hmm. God is able to resurrect. That's not the problem.
He can put your body back together.
Yeah, and and that's and that's 1 Corinthians 15. If you want to just read through that,
there you go. And in answering those other questions, and it sounds like she's got it pretty well down.
Yeah.
But for people who are like, well, yeah, but this, that, and the other, I just want to say, God's not stupid. God's not stupid.
Yeah, he's God.
So when a person died, in fact, Revelation 20:13 references, and the sea will give up her dead.
Yes.
So God knows what to do with the resurrection. And if you think about what you are made up of this little thing called DNA, right? God knows your DNA. God is going to handle the resurrection.
He's got it under control.
Well. He doesn't need a whole body or a whole skeleton or all. He's not stupid. Yeah.
Well, and of course, if you think about 1 Corinthians 15, right, starting verse 40, of course, through 45, but he says, look, there are heavenly bodies and earthly bodies, right? Yep. And the splendor of one is one thing, and the glory of another is another thing. I mean, it's you have to realize there at the resurrection. This is one of those things that's always been really interesting to me, because the Scripture says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So upon death, I am with the Lord in his abode. But I also know, as I look at the Scriptures, that there is going to be a resurrection of my physical body.
That's right.
And it will be changed. The body I'm in now will be resurrected, regardless of how long it has decayed, or how long it's been in the ground, or what happened to the body. I will be resurrected. And I don't think it's going to be like that scene in Beetlejuice where people look like the way they died and all that stuff. I don't think it's going to look like that. And we know we're going to have a
glorified body. And
we'll have a glorified
Here's the
body.
thing, right? We will have a glorified body. We won't be a glorified body, right? We are not a body that has a soul. We are a soul that has a body. This body is just the vehicle that gets us from point A to point B. But the real you is the real you inside of this body. This is just the vehicle. Paul would call it a tent. This is just the tent. Yeah. But the new body's going to be a mansion, man. Wow.
Yes.
Can't wait.
But I would also point out that our body is part of who we are. It's it's because God makes us whole. We are whole beings.
Well, that's why Jesus took on a physical body.
That's right. We're whole beings. So you can't ignore your body. You can't ignore who you are in the body, because that same body will be resurrected. And that to me is amazing, just to think about that. And could you imagine, Dave, that day that we're going to stand there, we're going to watch the resurrection, and we're going to watch the sea give up all her dead. I mean, and the earth and under the earth.
I mean, honestly, I can't imagine. I have no idea.
Right?
I can't even imagine what that's going to look like.
No.
I suspect that the rapture paintings and drawings are all incorrect.
I think they might be. Yeah.
You know what I mean? You see
it's amazing.
The depictions of all these people sort of like woo, like Rocket Man, shooting up in it. I suspect that's wrong, because heaven ain't up there, right?
No,
we always think heaven's up there somewhere.
Right.
That spiritual realm is all around us. I don't know what that's going to look like.
Right.
It's going to be pretty amazing. I know that.
Well, we talked about that a little bit when we were in the book of Acts. We were talking about the ascension, where it's literally just kind of goes from one realm to the next.
Right.
It's not, and it's like and of course it's up. There's no question the language says it's up, but as he goes up, he just kind of goes away.
The ascension.
The ascension.
Right, the ascension.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. But we're out of time for today, so.
If you guys what's going on tonight? We got to tell people about tonight. Remind people.
Tonight is our night of thanks and giving, and so bring a dessert to share, and come bring something to put in an Operation Christmas Child shoebox. Hey, we'll see you then. It's at 7:00. God bless you. You're loved, your family, and we will talk to you tomorrow.
You've reached the end of another episode of Pastors Live, a Rev FM production podcast. Thank you for listening. Submit your questions and comments by email to pastorslive@therev.fm. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review from your favorite podcast listening platform. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or Amazon so you don't miss the next episode drop.